Okay. So thank you all for joining the conversation. Today, I'm running this workshop on strategies for combating hate speech. If you don't know me already, my name is Veronica Pana Ikubenya, and I'm currently a master's student at Tel Aviv University here in Israel, and I'm also a fellow of the Ivan Coulter Fellowship. And so yeah, I think I've already done the introduction of myself. So some ground rules for the conversation. Um, I would like it to be an open conversation where we can share our opinion and our views, because when we engage and share our views, it will help enrich the conversation, and it will also help us to learn better from everything. I also want us to please engage respectfully. If you want to speak, you can raise up your hand, and you can also drop your comments in the chat box. I'll monitor it as well. Like I stated earlier, I seek your consent to record this session because we're going to share it online. If you want to ask questions during the session, you can just raise your hand and I would see that. You can also drop your question in the chat section and I would also read that as we go along. For persons who have a hearing impairment, we have live captions, but you have to click that for yourself. So I have put, like, if you look down on, if you're using your mobile phone, you see the three dots. Once you click on the three dots, you would see CC, so you can just activate the caption. If you also would have difficulties understanding my English, you can also do that as well and just read the caption. It will help you follow up with the conversation. And also, if there's anything you don't understand, please stop me at any point and I would explain myself. So I will just go through a rundown of the agenda of the conversation. I'm just going to state what the purpose and the aim of having this workshop is. And after that, I'll break down a bit about what hate speech is. And then we'll also go back to understand what online hate speech is and why we should care. I'll also try to highlight certain forms of hate speech as well as online hate speech. And it will be good to look at some of the impacts and effects of hate speech, because then you see why it's really important that we should care about it and, advocate for more changes. We'll look at some of the legal frameworks around globally, and I'll do some reference to Nigeria, which is my home country. We'll also look at certain strategies for combating online hate speech, and I like to call it as a multi-stakeholder approach, because at the end of the day, we all have to put our hands together to be able to address it. And then we'll have a question and answer section, and we'll try and do a recap of the workshop and, try to see what lessons we learned and one thing that we'll take away from the workshop. So as I go on speaking, just try to think about one thing that struck you about the workshop, and we'll have the conversation later on. So basically, the purpose of the workshop is to promote digital citizenship. As digital citizens, we want to ensure that we engage in the digital space safe, and we also do not endanger people or create unsafe spaces for people to, communicate, because the internet and social media platforms are changing the way that we communicate, bridging that gap. And in doing that, if we make it an unsafe space for people to have communications, nobody would want to be on these platforms. We also want to be able to develop skills. So how you can identify, how you can report and counter hate speech, because once you engage in online platforms, you will definitely come across certain hate speech. So what do you do when you see that? If you experience that yourself personally, what can you do to ensure that it doesn't happen again? The aim of this workshop is to also raise awareness about online hate speech and its effect that it has on not only individuals, but the society at large. We have a lot of people, of course, will know about hate speech, but sometimes we really do not know the ramifications of the impact it has, not only on other individuals, but society at large. So just to educate people on strategies and also to create a collaborative environment for sharing ideas, like I said earlier, sharing ideas and strategies. So I would like to have that conversation with you all. Um, I picked June to have this conversation because on June 18th is the International Day for Countering Hate Speech. The day is really important because it highlights and promotes tolerance, inclusion, and peace to create a safer and more respectable global community. And this year, the theme of this year was Speak Human Rights and Counter Hate Speech. Human rights is something that is fundamental to human beings, and hate speech is something that affects human rights. And, I think that was the reason that they decided to pick this theme, because it then speaks to remind people that we need to ensure that we create safe spaces for ourselves and we do not spread hate. So I highlighted some of the significance of celebrating the International Day for Countering Hate Speech, raising awareness, promote human rights, encouraging positive dialogue, just strengthen legal frameworks that already exist, and community action, because it brings people together to say, what can we do to raise more awareness? And that's why I'm also having this conversation, to raise more awareness for measures that we can use to counter hate speech. So let's go down to it. Let's understand what hate speech is. And basically, hate speech is any conversation, right, that belittles anyone, incites violence against an individual or a group of individuals based on things like race, religion, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability. I think that in the growing world that we have now and how social media is, there are some things that we take for granted. There are things that we take for granted sometimes, and we just normalize hate speech in certain ways. Oh, sorry. Someone just brought it to my attention. Give me a minute. I see that the slides are not moving. Just give me a minute to fix that. It's moving on my end, so I don't know why it's not moving. Okay. I do not know why that is happening. Just give me a second. Let me unshare and then try and reshare again. Thank you. Okay. Can you see my slides? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I did notice. So thank you very much for bringing it to my attention. Okay. So I had talked about the ground rules. I had spoken about the workshop agenda. I had spoken about the aim of the workshop, right? And I had reached trying to get an understanding of what hate speech is. So basically, it just means when you push out narratives, when you have conversation that belittles or discriminates against someone, incites violence against individuals, a group, especially based on their religion, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. When we talk about someone's color, their descent, because they're different from us, not understanding it. But like I was saying earlier, since social media started, it's so easily conversations of attacking somebody by their gender because they're a different ethnicity from us. It's so easy to see someone post it and you just laugh about it because you're not part of that ethnicity, or you're not part of that gender. Or sometimes you even push out the narrative, you can retweet the comments, you can like it. It sounds funny to you, but we've normalized. I think that to an extent there's been a normalization of it. And this is the reason why we're having the conversation. So we can call out those comments, videos, memes that, just create hate speech. Okay. So in the online space, it goes into the kind of discourse that pushes hatred, discrimination. It's still the same thing that happens offline, but you just see where we talk about individuals, and it still just has translated in the online space. And in the online space, you have people write it through text. Some people use pictures, videos, or even memes. Sometimes you see certain memes and you just laugh about it. But why does it go unnoticed? Or why is it very, very hurtful? Or why is it spread? It's because of the anonymity, right? So I can stay behind my phone, I can create a fake account, and it's easy for me to just create things and post it, because nobody would know who I am. You will see certain people that would have, oh, I have my personal account and I have a fake account. Some people would log into their fake account and go and troll other people, drop hurtful comments on other people's pages. It also serves as an echo chambers. When you put something online, it just goes, it's so viral, it just goes out. You put things, it also has a global reach. It's not like maybe if you're in your country and you stand on your street and you insult someone or you start inciting violence, it will just stay within your community. But the online space will translate globally. Anybody from anywhere can see your comment. And that's why it spreads pretty fast, and we need to call it out. Why should we care? I mean, it doesn't affect me. Why should we care? We should care because it's important to respect each other, to respect our values, and our differences as well, right? It's also important because it's a human right, and all human rights should be respected and protected. It's also important because it promotes equality and inclusion. It also fosters tolerance. You're able to be tolerant to other people. You certainly may not understand their stance on an issue. You may not understand why they have that conversation or thought. You may not understand their religion or their culture, but it also calls for tolerance, where you respect other people, despite the fact that you do not understand their thought process, right? Or because it differs from yours. There's also need to have an online space that is safe. I want to be able to log into a social media platform and not have somebody insult me or not have somebody call me or address me in a certain way because of my color or my ethnicity or my gender as well. You also want to protect democracy, because some of the issues or some of these hurtful comments or insightful comments have the possibility of destabilizing democracies. And why we should care is because if someone posts a comment and you have like a million people go to the streets to protest, it has the possibility of toppling a government, and you don't want that. You want a stable government. So I'll give a few examples. You saw what happened with the Rwanda genocide, and you know how just attacking one particular ethnicity led to a whole genocide in Rwanda. You have where people would push hate speech against women and girls, and it can lead to femicide. It can lead to people you really don't know how much one post can go in inciting violence. In Namibia, we had the Shut It Down, which began in October 2020. And we saw other countries that joined the conversation to say, let's stop hate against women, because certain times people will come on social media and post comments that are hurtful to women. That also makes this space unsafe for women to, come up online to drop comments or just engage in conversation. We saw that during COVID-19, the world experienced the Asian hate as well, and there were increased physical and verbal attacks on Asians, because people were saying, oh, they're the ones causing COVID. And you saw how just posting and pushing out that narrative had innocent people being attacked and hurt. You had xenophobia in South Africa. You have anti-Semitism, and currently we have that, which is the attack on Jews because of their religion. You have ableism, just basically pushing the narrative with persons living with disability. Because you see somebody, oh, they're using a wheelchair, you laugh at them, you post a comment, or you see somebody because they have albinism, you laugh at them or post comment to say, sometimes people make jokes about their eyes, but you don't know how hurtful those comments are. And then when people see them on the street, people attack them. What you don't understand is that sometimes the incitement that starts online doesn't necessarily stay online. And these examples show how it starts online and it moves to the physical and leads to violence. And in extreme cases, it also leads to death. So I'll address certain forms of online hate. Please let me know if you can hear me and you're following the conversation. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for all those others who have joined. Thank you for joining the conversation. So certain forms of online harms that we have witnessed is cyberbullying, where someone comes and tries to bully a certain group of people. There's also trolling, doxing. Oh, you want to put people's personal information online, or necessarily hate-filled comments, posting derogatory, racist, sexist, or homophobic even comments, and you post it on social media or other online platforms, and pushing out narratives. Even the spreading of fake news can lead to violence. Or you just say, oh, I was hit by someone of a certain color on the street, and you go and write it online, and it's not true, but you're trying to push the narrative to be able to get or incite people to attack a certain race, violently. So that's why it's important for us to also verify information before we retweet, verify information before we post. Now with AI, it's really difficult certain times to be able to distinguish between comments that are written by humans as well as comments that are written by machine. So before you retweet, post, or share information, always try to confirm the source, who wrote it, the time it was written, because I've seen instances where violent videos are shared and later on someone will come out to debunk it and say, this was a video that was posted years back. I'll just give an instance, like maybe, okay, someone will post a video now showing where people are attacking someone, and we say, oh, this is happening in this country. We need to speak up. We need to fight for our rights, not knowing that that's a video that was posted long time ago, because we don't verify it. And, people can even just react and go to the streets and say, oh, we need to protect ourselves. And in that space, that little amount of time can, perpetrate violence offline. So it's always good to verify information. So I will talk about some of the impacts and the effects of online hate speech. I know that in my conversation, I already talked about them, but it also promotes discrimination and inequality and exclusion as well, right? Because of, like, if you put certain comments online, you're discriminating about somebody from a different, because I belong to a different ethnicity or different religion, I come out and I put hateful comments about the other religion or gender. It can also incite violence, like I've stated, and it can also undermine social cohesion, and it can also drive. So it's important, especially for our democracy, right? That especially countries that, I'll speak for Nigeria. Nigeria has a lot of different ethnicities, right? And we say this, that our ethnicity, our different, our ethnicity is something that brings the diversity, because we have different diversities, it enriches the experience of Nigeria. It brings different views and different perspectives. We like to showcase our cultures. But when somebody wants to perpetrate violence or push a certain narrative, they also can use that to divide us, to say, oh no, this ethnicity, this is how they are. But then we need to ensure that we do not allow that. Mental health is something that we also rarely speak about, but online hate speech also affects people's mental health. If I always go on social media or use a social platform where they're always insulting people or derogatory comments about women, I don't think I would like to use that platform, because I don't want to feel, and you just get anxiety. Sometimes it may even affect somebody to, like, even just say, I don't want to even use this platform, and it can even push someone into depression if certain things are said about me and somebody attacks me on a social media platform because I'm a woman. I really wouldn't want to use that. It also normalizes intolerance as well. It fuels misinformation, like I said, and it erodes safe spaces. Like I was stating earlier, that it does threaten democracy. and the sustenance of it. You know, when you spread fake news, it can affect the democracy, because if people go to the streets to protest or to incite violence, then it can affect. It can also cause economic costs. And I would give an example of economic cost. Platforms like YouTube and Instagram and even Twitter have been monetized. So you can imagine if I'm an influencer and I have my page, and every time I post my content, people come and write hateful comments about me. Oh, you do not look beautiful. Oh, we do not like your products. I don't want to come back and use that platform. And then I lose money, because that's where I get my money from as an influencer, or that's where I promote my business as well. Some of the legal consequences it can have for you is that certain countries have laws that protect people against hate speech. So if you go on around Putin, you can face the legal repercussions as well. Like I said earlier, it has a global reach and spread as well. So, of course, I just want to talk a bit about some of the international frameworks that exist. Because of how online hate speech has been pushing out, the UN decided to create a strategy and an action plan on hate speech in 2019. And this was in response to the growing global efforts to combat hate speech as well. And if you look at our Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in Article 7 states that we all have equal protection and guarantees protects us from discrimination. If you look through all the conventions that I put inside, I put in the document here, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the ICCPR, the Genocide Convention, all these legal frameworks as clearly state, one, everybody has the right to freedom of expression, everybody has the right to free speech, but at the same time, everybody is protected from discrimination as well. And it's really important that we have international instruments that speak against that, because, like I said earlier, we have the human right to dignity, right to life, to freedom of association, and most hate speech affects those fundamental rights that have been guaranteed to us. So, in response to online hate speech, countries have passed hate speech laws. Social media platforms have tried to implement content removals. So if somebody posts a hateful comment and it's flagged to the social media platforms, what they would do is, depending on the category of the offense or the claim, they would, if it's on the face of it, a hate speech, immediately, if you read it, you can tell they'll remove the content immediately. But most times, they also want to investigate if it is, because they're also trying to promote freedom of speech. And there's also a thin line, and there's the conversation between, if we have regulations on hate speech, how can we also protect the right to free speech? So the conversation keeps going back and forth. Reporting mechanisms. Also, social media platforms have reporting mechanisms where if you see certain comments, you can report it and they will take it down. They also have international cooperation. So governments are cooperating with each other as well as platforms to ensure that we create a safe space for everyone. I'll speak to the Nigerian context because I'm from Nigeria, but I'll also put it that most constitutions of the world, written or oral, have the protection of human rights, and most of the rights, freedom from discrimination, the right to dignity, free speech. In the Nigerian Constitution, under our Chapter 4, you have all our fundamental human rights stated there. And then we also have the Nigerian Cybercrime Act that talks about and addresses certain online harms, which also includes online hate speech. For the broadcasting code, we passed basically prohibiting hate speech. And it's very, very important that, especially during election period, and this was really important for the Nigerian government to include it in our Electoral Act, to put a provision against hate speech, especially during elections, because certain times politicians or political parties would like to push people or put out narratives just to be able to win the elections, right? So yeah, I think I've spoken a bit, so I'll just give a bit so that everyone, if you want to share, it's a fun, I want us to have like a dialogue. So you can drop in the comment section, or you can just raise your hand to answer. What do you think can be done to address online hate speech? I know I hinted a few as I spoke earlier, but I'd also love to hear from you as well. Anyone like to share their thoughts? If you're shy, you can just drop it in the comment section, or you can just raise your hand. Okay. Okay. So I will just go ahead to speak, and if anybody drops, I would still read it as well. But I would also just like to share. I stated earlier that it's really a multi-stakeholder approach that would help us to be able to combat online hate speech. First, I started with the users of the platform, because for online platforms, most of the time is user content generated. So we, the users, are the ones creating the content for this platform. The platforms just necessarily give you a space to have your conversation. That's what they provide you. But you and I provide the content. Okay. Thank you. How is online speech defined in the context of your research or study? Okay. Thank you, Amit. So basically, online hate speech is defined as those speech that would come online, that people post online, whether it's by text, by video, or by pictures, that would attack a certain group of people, group of individuals, as a result of their race, their gender, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, something they identify with, as well as disability. So I hope that that answers your question, Amit. Thank you for asking that. I appreciate it. So like I was stating, most social media platforms are user generated. So we are the ones that provide the content. For platforms like X, you have to tweet. For Instagram, you post your pictures. For TikTok, you create your videos or your pictures and you post it. So we are the ones creating content. So I started with us because it starts from you and I. What can we do to be able to address it? Then you have the government's goal, and they've entered into a contract to ensure that they create safe spaces for us. They protect our security. And that social contract, as we move to the online space, transfers also to the online space. So most times government try to also ensure that they protect our security, both in the offline and online space. Platform owners. Thank you. Thank you, Paula. Paula says, fostering partnership between government, tech companies, civil society, and academics to develop effective strategies against hate speech. You're definitely correct. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay. Joanne says, creating awareness on issues for people to have to be more sensitive, because most people do it unknowingly or just for fun, not knowing this is a real problem with feelings on the other side. Really, that is true. And like I stated it earlier, we've normalized certain actions online that we really do not understand the effects that it has on people, and the effect that it has on the larger society as well, right? You may just see a comment where somebody speaks about an ethnicity and says, oh, this is how this ethnicity or this is how this gender is, and you jump on the conversation and you retweet it and you share it, and someone sees it. And in the offline space, someone can just be sitting down and if someone of the particular gender walks up and that person just remembers that comment, and before you know what's happening, the person just attacks the other person just because of a comment that they saw online, not necessarily because the person from that ethnicity or gender has done something to them. So platform owners as well as traditional media players, because we've seen traditional media players like journalists, media houses, bloggers, they've started coming online and also trying to use the online space, but they are also regulated by their own space. So we're trying to see how they would also carry those principles and policies that govern them to the online space. New traditional media players with social media platform came a different ballgame of online reporting. You now have bloggers, YouTubers, vloggers, you have influencers, content creators, TikTokers, we have Twitters, you and I just tweeting and going. We have technology developers as well as technology companies. So it's really a whole multi-stakeholder approach. And I'll just try to go a little bit fast. And yeah, thank you for dropping your questions. I will just complete and then I'll go into the question. Thank you. So like I said, it starts with you and I put some of the things that you and I can do. So we can have positive engagement online. It starts with us just, when I'm using these platforms, I engage positively and respect everybody online. I don't post something that is harmful or hateful as well. And you can even go a step further. Like when you see a hate comment or speech or something that's very harmful, you can just report it to the platforms. Platforms, what they do now is, thank you. I think as a content creator, one can avoid hate comments from followers by locking the comment section. Thank you very much, Queen. Yeah, you can also do that, just, But when you also see hurtful comments, you can report those comments and the platforms will investigate. And when they investigate and see that those comments are hurtful, they will take them down. You can also call out harmful content. So once you see if someone pushing a narrative, and that's when we go to counter speech mechanisms. So we all have like bystanders, but don't be a quiet bystander. Take action. Counter the narrative. When somebody call the person out, when you see somebody pushing out a narrative about a certain gender, pushing out a narrative about someone from a different ethnicity that is untrue, you can counter it. And that's when countering speech mechanisms, people are using different narratives. When someone posts a comment, a hurtful statement, you can report it as well as make a post to say, this is a wrong narrative, this is wrong. And now social media platforms have even like an additional place where you can just state whether this comment, you can put comments on or comment on something that someone has posted. You can educate others after this conversation, right? It's all about awareness. You can have the conversation with your friend, with your roommate, with your colleagues at work, just to basically educate them. When you see somebody laughing about a narrative that someone has posted online that is hurtful, you can bring their you can educate them and inform them about that. So it changes the narrative where they no longer, when they see things like that, they would call it out immediately, or they will pick it out instead of joining the conversation to share or to mimic or laugh at the person. You can also advocate for policy, regulation, or laws, and also push for their implementations. So in countries, if your individual country doesn't have a regulation that online regulates online hate speech at the moment, you can start advocating for one. And you can also volunteer for organizations that already do that. All you need to do is just search organizations that work on this. You can write policy white papers, just join the conversation and share it out. You never know what effect your advocacy would have of informing your government about that. You can also engage policymakers, lawmakers, parliamentarians on how to ensure that we better regulate our online space. You can also have conversation with platform owners, developers, just basically to push the narrative and educate people more. You can attend public hearings. I know in every country, they always announce before they have public hearings when a bill or a regulation is passed. Sometimes if they're passing a policy, they'll call out for people to, send in their comments, and you can do that as well. That will change the narrative. and it also ensure that you join and be part of the government. For certain governments, their role is definitely number one, to regulate, pass the regulation. And not only do they need to pass the regulation, but to ensure that the regulation is enforced. Because most times with governments, you would see certain times where the regulation is there, the policy is there, but the implementation is really, really low. And it's also good to ensure that these laws, and there's a balance even between the laws, that they do not impede hate speech. I will give a context with Nigeria. There was a time that we wanted to pass an online hate speech bill, but activists protested against the bill because people were scared of the possibilities of that being used to impede the freedom of speech. Public campaigns, government also is in place, to raise awareness as well on the issues, to educate the public of the danger of hate speech, and just ensuring that in having our conversations online, we do not endanger and impede democracy, like I said earlier. Collaborating with platforms. Paula mentioned something that was very critical when she said the collaboration between tech companies, government, CSOs, NGOs, and also support victims by providing resources for them. So civil society, like I stated, civil society is there to hold government accountable. They advocate for better laws. Like I said, you can volunteer for organizations who are already working on this. They also support people who have been, going through online hate speech. Certain organizations, what they do is they have created platforms where you can report online hate speech, or even comments that are hurtful or harmful or illegal. So they have platforms, and you can just go and report. And when you report, they follow up with the government and ensure that those things are taken down or removed from the internet. They also provide support services for those who have been victims. And they also conduct research and monitoring. Like, what can we do? Have conversations, dialogue to say, well, how can we better address this issue? And some of them even have pushed out for counter speech initiatives to say, okay, we would run this campaign to counter the speech that is being, which would help to educate people, and they run educational program and awareness program as well. For tech companies, what they're trying to do now with the growth of AI, we've seen certain companies develop AI tools that can be used to monitor hate speech, misinformation, and also to help content moderation. Because the honest truth is that the amount of posts or comments or content that is generated by each user on each platform is a lot, that most times the platform owners can't get the manpower to look at everything. So just in order to ensure that their spaces are safe, they try to use AI tools for their content moderation and detecting, and also for the removal of those harmful content. So creating policies. So most tech platforms have their policies. So ensure that you try to get time to read their privacy policies. They really read their terms of contract or their terms of agreement. Most times in their terms of agreement, they'll tell you what is allowed on their platforms and what is not allowed on their platforms. They will tell you if you do this, if you violate their rules, they will take you out of the platform. They also publish transparency reports. So like reports from government, reports from individuals to take content down. Social media platforms like Meta and X, YouTube, I think Google does that as well. What they do is they publish the report. So if you want to just go and see how government is seeking content to be taken down, you can go and read certain reports. You can also report. So they create tools to ease reporting and also ease blocking. So you can also report. But there's also a need for us to have like a joint conversation where everybody is there to work on this. And I also try to put traditional media, bloggers, journalists, and they're all moving into the new media players. Traditional TV, radio companies, and all now coming online, having podcasts. They are using YouTube to vlog. So it's important that as we're creating content, as we're posting our content, we ensure that we, they follow the policies of the platforms, positive influences. There are certain times where content creators create harmful comments. There's some people that would create comments joking about a particular gender, joking about a particular ethnic group. It's really important that we call out content creators when they make certain harmful comments, and not normalize it and by sharing. It's also good that they partner. So all these stakeholders, we need to collaborate together to be able to ensure that our spaces are safe. Thank you. So now we move into the question and answer session. Thank you for joining, and I hope that you were able to learn a thing or two from the conversation. But I will try to take some of the comments that are already in the chat box. Since Brianna said, since hate speech is subjective, how can we address this issue without it being abusive? Since an individual can determine a statement to be hateful, do you see the current definition changing? Yeah, Brianna, I actually see the definition changing, because if you let's just try to be futuristic in a way and just project the capabilities of AI. We still do not know, and every day AI is changing, and now we have deep fakes where someone can just take a video of me and use my voice to create a video of me saying something. So I see definitely the definition changing as we go on, as new technologies are coming in, the definition will expand. Change is something that is really constant, and over time we've seen it's just like we had the definition of hate speech offline. The definition changed where we had the growth of online platforms and social media as well. And then definitely with AI tools, with the metaverse, you see the dynamism of online hate speech will change, and the definition will need to change to address that. Thank you very much. Cecilia, I think I see your hand. Yes, so you can just unmute.
Apologies, I forgot that I muted my mic. So just to continue what you talked about with about Brianna, it's true about the consequences of AI. So we have deepfake. So there's different types of forms of hate speech that you mentioned, ableism. You mentioned about the colorism and other stuff. But when it comes to AI, deepfake is usually the common one, and it's been exacerbated. And now it's difficult because identities are slandered, roles, careers are slandered because of their whole deepfake. So somebody can take you, example, Veronica, and say you have said something and spread it around, and people always tend to do this. And there's literally no policies online that kind of combat it. So it's something that people are in fear of. Now, my question particularly is, you mentioned different forms of hate speech, and including ableism, which for me is very passionate because as a disability activist and advocate, I always look for ways where disability inclusion is provided. Now, there are certain countries which are democratic, like for example, Tanzania, and the ways that they combat hate speech is censoring, which also kind of brings into, when you censor a government or you censor a country, that means there's no freedom of speech. So do you think censoring could help? Or what other ways that people could provide in a way they could use instead of censoring? What are the ways they could combat hate speech? Another thing is, people have to notice that hate speech comes from three things. There's disinformation, misconception, and miscommunication. So once you know exactly the information of something, even if you read it online or you listen to people, you're able to assess and analyze what is true and what is not true. So it's always good to have all the facts ready before you enter into the whole space of online or offline.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you for your question. So the thing, I'll start by saying, and I said that earlier, there is a thin line between protecting, there's always that, dispute of saying, how do we protect hate speech? And how do we protect against hate speech, correction, and how do we preserve, the freedom of speech to express ourselves? But also remember that even if we have the freedom of speech, you still have certain limitations to the freedom of speech, right? And it's really important to note that, because most people would say hurtful comments and say, well, I have the freedom to express myself, I have the freedom to express my views, but you also have to remember that in expressing your views, in expressing your own, and exercising your own freedom of speech, is that you respect the other person. Right? I think they say in the law, your right, the right of the other person stops where I think it's where your hand ends or something. So you also have to remember that there are other people in the conversation to be able to respect other people's rights. And most times when governments, the thing is that because we do not understand technology, sometimes the way it changes, it changes so fast. And most times governments will not have the time to, it's not easy to understand this space because you're trying to say, okay, what's the best way to protect our people? And, it's just like trying different strategies to see which one will work better, which one wouldn't work. So most times when governments censor, it's because their first instinct is to say, we need to protect our people first. But in censoring, sometimes you can over-censor, if I can use that word, or censoring in the fact that you now start impeding on people's rights. Or you can pick or choose. It's a cherry-picking thing. Oh, this comment, no, you're from the opposition party, censor, the opposition party censor. So when we use tools like censoring, or there should be an accountability mechanism that checks who is doing the censoring, right? I will just give, if the government decides to use censoring. And I'll go back to say, that's why, so in the US, for certain platforms, the liability under Section 230, social media platforms don't have the liability for content posted on their platforms. So like I said earlier, we use the social media platform. Content is generated by us. So social media platforms don't have the liability in the US, basically to say, except for certain states. So with the US, certain states will pass their different laws. But Section 230 removes the liability to say, online platforms will not be held responsible for content that I post, right? But what they can do is to go ahead and say, okay, if I post a comment that's hurtful, they will take it out, right? But we have seen governments reacting to that. So it takes growth where we'll see, and that's why it happened in Nigeria when they wanted to pass the online hate speech bill, and people came out to say, no, this is not going to work. Because if you looked at the act, there wasn't an accountability. You need to have like an accountability mechanism. And that's why we have checks and balances with democracy. The judiciary checks the executive, and it goes around the legislature. So everybody is checking everybody just to ensure. That's why we don't like countries that are not democratic, because there's no checks and balance. If the government is trying to push over their board, there's also something that will check them and say, no, you can't do that. And that's why we have civil society, and that's why we have us as actors. So civil society, media's role is to hold the government accountable, put out the truth, right? So once you see things that are happening, that's why you see when governments want to pass a law that doesn't sit well, like censoring, they would, okay, I think Mr. NDBC wants to speak. Yes, you can unmute your mic and speak. Thank you very much for joining.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. And this is an interesting topic, and I've learned quite a bit, and I felt I should just make a few comments. And the first thing I think I want to say is that we have become less human. We have become less compassionate. We have become the internet and the online thing has created a rewarding system that it doesn't matter anymore as long as we push out content out there. It doesn't matter if any person is hot. It doesn't matter. So what matters is, oh, it's trending. There is an impression or there are hits. So that's all that matters to, because the online mechanism tends to reward these things. And that is what we value as people. Now, that's what matters to us. So it doesn't matter if someone is hot in the process. It doesn't matter if someone is offended by whatever we're saying, as long as those things are trending. And that is a challenge. Another challenge that I see is that we have quite a number of laws, but most times we have issues implementing these laws. And so there is no swift process upon which, oh, if someone senses something to be hate speech, oh, he's reported and he's prosecuted, and perhaps it is published so that people will get to know, oh, this thing, oh, someone said something like this, and therefore it is, he was punished. So it becomes a deterrent measure. But those things, because of, for instance, in Nigeria, because of the slow administration of justice, it becomes very difficult to mete out justice at the pace which online information are disseminated. So it's difficult. So if, for instance, it's going to take years to get justice, where someone who has been caught was caught in split seconds, so it's going to be a serious challenge. And another thing is that whatever it is that we push out there, really, most times are irreparable or cause irreparable damages. Because, for instance, if you say something hurtful and maybe someone develops mental health issues, you cannot deal with it by just saying you're sorry. You cannot deal with it by just retracting it or perhaps removing it or taking it down. So most times this taking down mechanism, yes, it could help, just so that it is not further disseminated, but it does not really solve the problem of the hurt or the damage that has been caused. So sometimes the damage is irreparable. If, for instance, you come and say a young girl, maybe like yourself, or you call the person a prostitute, and for instance, and okay, the whole world knows that the person is, or assumes that the person is a prostitute, or perhaps you come up with deepfakes and everything to make sure that the person looks like one. Then you come around, oh, someone, he takes it down. And remember, the internet does not forget. It could be assumed anytime. So the idea of taking down really perhaps does not particularly solve the problem. So it seems to me that we should actually go back to learning the ethics of communication. We should actually understand that firstly, we are firstly human, then secondly, what we tend to be. Because if we understand that we are humans and there is need for us to be careful in our speech, be measured in our speech, then we would be, at least we have observed some sort of self-restraint in trying to hurt other people. And if, for instance, again, if we are particular about not rewarding speeches or things that are hurtful by clicking on them, by sharing them, by things like that, that could actually help. But again, as a nation, it will make more sense if, for instance, our laws are swiftly implemented, because we do have laws, like you mentioned earlier in your presentation, the Cybercrime Act, for instance, that ensures that people who go ahead to defame people online are punished. But how many people have been punished so far? How many have you read? So if, for instance, that we are swift as a country in implementing our laws, and as a people, we observe the ethics of communication and be a little reluctant in rewarding, because this whole thing is about, oh, let's trend, let's make news, let's do this, for whatever it is worth, and be reluctant in rewarding those kind of systems, those kind of things. Maybe we just might make progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ndubisi. Thank you very much for sharing that. It goes back to talk about netiquette, ensuring that, you highlighted it, that we are first humans, that we don't forget that we're humans when we're having our conversations on online platforms. And like you stated, this is why we need to do the work. This is why we all need to be digital rights advocates, right? In our small spaces, call government and hold them accountable. Or what can we do as a group to ensure that we follow our government to ensure that they implement these rules? Because like I stated earlier, we have those rules, but are they implemented? Like Mr. Ndubisi said, are they implemented? If they're implemented, who has been held accountable, right? So that's really, really important. As we engage in the space, decorum is always needed. Do we respect other people? So thank you very, very much for your content. I will just answer a few questions in the chat box. Okay, so on. What community-driven initiative has proven to be effective? One that I think that I've seen to be effective is countering the speech. So when you see certain narratives being pushed, even when you report them, you also have to be able to counter the speech, right? Like we saw during the Asian hate, when people were protesting and saying no to Asian hate, stop it, trying to put the whole blame of COVID-19. There was also a narrative, the counter narrative of pushing, no, stop the Asian hate. Asians are not the ones that caused it. They put a counter narrative to debunk the claims that it was Asians that were pushing out the COVID-19. So I think that that's also one that works. What can be done when the side receiving hate speech is a child or minor? How can this be controlled or prevented? So normally when the person is a minor, using social media platforms, that's why it's, to start with, online platforms, so they have been certain laws passed in different countries, right, to protect children online. Some countries are now saying that, oh, we are trying to protect people online. We have to go a step further to protect children online. So they are also passing, the UK last year passed the Online Safety Act, and it had a lot of emphasis on protecting children. In Nigeria, we have the policy for protecting children online, and we have a bill before the National Assembly where they're trying to pass a law that protects children online. So normally, platforms are not allowed to have minors on their platforms. There's supposed to be age restrictions of children using platforms. And what other countries did is to put a restriction to say, well, if you want to have a children's platform, what you can do is to ensure that you put a safe platform. So if you look at YouTube, they have YouTube Kids. So YouTube Kids ensures that when children are using that platform, it ensures that all they see are for children. If you use YouTube and you're trying to post your comments, thank you, Cecilia, I'll come to you. If you're using YouTube and you're trying to post your video, to tell you, is this for children? Because they have a restriction to say, well, if it's not for children, they will not share it on kids. You see platforms like Netflix or Amazon Prime or other platforms. If you click on the profile, you see for your children. So you can create profiles setting for children. So that's what platform owners are trying to do, technology. They're trying to restrict children. And with restricting children, it's really, really hard to verify. So that's why age verification is a thing that they're trying to say, okay, platforms, ensure that people coming on your platforms are adults, right? And some countries have different age categorization. Some say, oh, from 18, some from 13, you can access the platforms. But it's also difficult to check children because, it just asks you, are you older than 17? And well, I don't have anything to check. Click, I'm older than 17. So obviously a teenager who wants to use the platform will just say, well, yes, I'm older, but it should go a step further to put in checks because it will tell you, oh, tell me your age. I can lie about my age, and there's no way to verify. So that's why social media platforms need to be held accountable as well to say, how do you verify this? Even if it's difficult, let's try to see how we can link identification. Then it goes down to bringing privacy issues, but that's the conversation that has to keep going. We have to keep speaking up about these things. Thank you very much. Cecilia, yeah?
Well, since we're talking about accountability, so would you think it's fair? It's a question to you and everybody, that people get prosecuted for things that they posted years ago that could even be 10 years ago.
Sorry, I didn't get the accountability in what aspect?
I said, since you're talking about accountability, so should people be prosecuted by the hate speech that they posted online? That could be last year, 10 years ago, even more.
So we don't, the important thing is that we want our laws to be implemented now. So it's also good for us to see when we see certain comments that people post online, we call it out and we ensure that we take the steps legally to ensure that those things are addressed, right? Because we don't want to delay it. But yes, you can report it. I don't think that there's a limitation. Unlike said, sometimes some laws will have limitation. I don't think that there's a limitation for what someone posts, right? Especially when it comes to human rights. It's really, really important. And I don't think that there's a limitation to calling somebody out. Because if you've seen in countries where a musician wasn't famous at maybe I'll give an example. In 2016, a musician wasn't famous. He wrote certain hateful comments online on his platform, on Twitter, was insulting. And then when he became famous in 2022, people went to dig up the comments. People say, this shows your personality. They're holding him accountable for his actions. And when they called him out, it was so bad that everybody kept on calling him out and said, you know what, we're going to cancel your music. And this is not even the law. This is just people calling him out for the behavior that he had. And he came out to apologize to say, okay, I have grown. Thank you for bringing me, thank you for holding me accountable. But that was something I posted when I was a teenager. But it shows that it doesn't mean that if someone posted a hurtful comment or a harmful comment in the past, they can't be held accountable for. But that's what we're trying to push for, to say, we don't have to wait 10 years. We don't have to wait till the person is famous to hold them accountable. Once someone posts a hurtful comment online, the platform should be able not only to identify who has posted that comment, but also to hold them accountable. And that's what Mr. Ndubisi said with ensuring the implementations of our laws. And that's why government needs to be more proactive. I think that for me, there has to be like a coalition. So forming like a center, a coalition where all these stakeholders are working together. Because technology platforms are already doing that. They're collaborating to address these issues. So it would be good for us to have, like, in our countries, the central one and also the international bodies. I know the UN has, tried to push out their strategy and plan, but it's for us to also key into that to ensure that we address hate speech. I'll take the last comment that I see from Amit. It says, how can future research contribute to developing more effective strategies? And that's what research does, because the issues that we face now, as Cecilia pointed and as I pointed out earlier, AI is changing, and it's, the ramifications of it is growing every day. So when people research, when people are able to use, like now, people are developing AI tools to be able to track hate speech. They're publishing it. They're labeling it. They're identifying it. They're sending it to governments to say, they're sending it to platforms. You need to take it down. They are making them accountable for that. But then, as the conversation grows, as more research grows, as more people, more AI tools are developing, you would see that the tools will become smarter with machine learning, and you see that the dynamics will change. And yeah, I think that more research is really, really good because, yeah, Cecil, you have the floor.
Thank you for the beautiful presentation. My question is, how do we differentiate hate speech from the truth? Because I've seen situations whereby someone has said the truth the way it is, and it is labeled as hate speech. How do we bring people to term to the truth without them feeling that it is a hate speech?
Thank you. That's really an important question. And this is what happened when our country was trying, sorry, I'll keep using the Nigerian context because I'm from Nigeria, so please do permit me and excuse me for that. So I'll give an instance. when Nigeria was trying to pass the hate speech bill and people, civil society came out to fight against it, one of the things and the fears that you have is because when government puts this law, what will define hate speech? Will they define it in the context that it doesn't become a tool being used to shut down the truth, as you said, right? How can we differentiate between the truth? I think that you can distinguish between the truth and hate speech because it will be clear. Hate speech is derogatory. Hate speech is insightful. Hate speech will try to bring down someone because of their gender, because of their identity, because of their ethnicity, because of their nationality. But what would the truth say? Let me give an instance of holding government accountable. The truth will be clear. Has the government worked? Has the government failed? There's a famous judge in Nigeria who's I can't remember his name, but what he says is government should be able to take dissent. When people dissent with government, it doesn't mean they're against the government. They're just holding the government accountable. They're stating the truth. Has the economy GDP grown or has it fallen? It's the truth. There's facts. When something is truth, there's fact that follows it. There's fact that clearly states whether it's true or not. So when the truth is being spoken, it will definitely be distinguishable between hate speech, right? If you can back it up with facts, right? Because even under the law would look at what facts have you brought to support your claim. If you say, oh, this speech is hate speech, the law would want to see, or the judge in the context, or the jury, whichever jurisdiction you're in, will say, let's look at the facts. What does the fact say? Was this, and some of the ingredients, was it hateful? Was it intended to cause harm? Was it intended to cause violence? What is the truth? If you said the truth, can you support the truth with facts? You can bring the facts. You can bring evidence that your government has failed. It will be clear. Have they failed? What's the current GDP? What was the GDP in the past? Where's the economy now? Can you show the exchange rates? The Nigerian context, you can see the differentiation between the past exchange rate and the present exchange rate. So in speaking your truth and holding your government accountable, I'm using the government because it's a clear cut where it's easier for you to say, this is hate speech and this is not. When you talk about an ethnicity or a gender, and when you say hurtful comments about women, you say, oh, all women are dumb. It's not a fact that all women are dumb because we have women who are brilliant. So that statement is false. If someone comes and pushes out the narrative, all women are dumb, all genders are dumb. I know there's a comment where you say, oh, all men are scum. But the honest truth is that statement pushes out a narrative that categorizes a gender as bad. And that's not true. That's false. Not all men are scum. But society has pushed out and normalized that comment that we don't even call it out as hate speech targeted towards men. We just, as a society, are conversant or agree to say, all men are scum. But that's not the fact. We have lovely fathers, we have lovely brothers, we have lovely men who are here with us on this platform. So we can clearly differentiate and say that's false. And the truth is that some men may, but not all men. So Cecil, I hope I've been able to answer that. Thank you.
Well answered.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So any more questions? If we don't have, I'd like to move fast into like the last thing. I also wanted to just do a recap of what we had, the conversation we've had. And the conversation we've had is we try to identify what is hate speech and what is online hate speech. And I broke it down to say online hate speech is when you have insightful comments, derogatory comments, just basically any statement that is targeted towards a specific group or gender because of certain things like their ethnicity, their gender, their disability as well. We learned why we should care, because of its human rights. We need to protect human rights. We need to protect our democratic society. We learned about the different forms. We learned about the impacts, how it can impede, it can, topple them. It has the possibility of toppling democracy and pushing out violence, moving from the online space to the offline space. We talked about some of the legal frameworks, the international one, and I did a focus on Nigeria as well. And we talked about certain strategies, right? What we as individuals can do in our own spaces to be responsible citizens, which was also stated by Mr. Undubisi when he spoke earlier. And so I'd like to know what we'll do differently. You can also just drop it in the comments or drop one word, what you would do differently. Hate speech must not and will not win. It must not win and it will not win. But we all need to become involved, get educated, and speak out firmly to counter hate speech, right? Hate is hate, and we can't excuse it and we can't ignore it as well. So I would like if one or two people can, before we close the session, one or two people can just tell us what they would do differently, from attending the conversation. What do you think you would do differently? So I'd just like to hear a few and we can just end it. Does anybody want to go? Okay, I can start with myself. Okay, thank you, Cecil.
I think for me, from this workshop, I think the best thing I can do is to always look things from the other person's perspective and not mine. Looking things from the other person's perspective is always a better way of evaluating things before clicking that button or sending that comment. And that makes a big difference.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. That's really important. Thank you. Yes, Cecilia?
For me, basically, it's just to raise awareness, because I came to understand that being able to talk to different people from different backgrounds, not everybody understands hate speech as hate. They think it's just speech. So raising awareness and telling people what you did is wrong and what you said is wrong is a first step for everything.
Thank you very much. Paula?
Thank you, Veronica. Also, I believe we can advocate for international cooperation and standards to combat cross-border hate speech effectively. And this also involves the collaborating with other countries that harmonize law, share best practices, and address the global nature of online platforms.
Thank you very much, Paula. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. That's the honest truth, and that's why I love having conversations like this, is to build digital rights advocates. So now all of us are advocates, and we'll go on to ensure that we not only become good members of society and in the online space, we would respect each other, but we'll also spread the word to other people and start initiatives. Trust me, I can't wait to hear some of the feedback. I was really excited today about this conversation and hearing the feedback from everyone and the engagement and the questions. Thank you very much, because it enriched the conversation, and thank you for lending your voices and your Saturday to join in this conversation. And I hope that it doesn't end with attending this session, but it ends with us doing the work, getting our hands dirty and doing the work, to call out hate speech online when we see it. So thank you very much for joining this session. I really appreciate you joining in. Thank you. If you want to reach me, you can always reach me on my contact, or you can always reach me on LinkedIn or any social media platform you choose to. So thank you very much for attending. I will stop the recording now.
Amazing. Thank you.